Hello dear viewers, it's George from Ireland. Here I am in Cape Town Castle, or the Kasteel van Goed Hoop, the Castle of Good Hope. Not so hopeful for les indigènes around here. So Jan van Riebeck got orders from the 17 lords of the Dutch East India Company in late 1651, and so that December 1651 he set sail. Took them 3.5 months to arrive here, which was actually very good time. Now they had to sail halfway across the South Atlantic because of the way that the winds and the tides went, and then turn back, come east to get here. But that worked for them. So then he landed here. They'd already identified Table Bay as the best place to establish their settlement. Remember, the Portuguese had visited without any intention to stay in the longer term, just for the replenishment of their ships, had clashed with the local Khoisan tribes, being bested at the Battle of Solt River 142 years earlier. But anyway, Jan van Riebeck, he came here. They landed, I think it was the 5th of April, and they used to celebrate that in the apartheid era. And they began constructing this fort only 5 days later, not here at a site a small distance away. And that four-cornered fort, they completed that in 11 months. So that was very good going. But the local people realized this meant that the Netherlanders were intending to stay permanently, and that was bad news. That the Dutch immigrants, that they wanted to purchase cattle, and the Khoisan said no, they want to breed cattle. That obviously is indicative of an intention to stay here forever. So the Khoisan were divided into many different tribes, attempted to coalesce to fight off the Dutch, and they were cunning. They were cognizant that gunpowder wouldn't work in the rain. But anyway, in the end, the Dutch won, and that was it. So the other castle was seen to be too small in an unsuitable place. So they built this one, and when this one was completed, decades later, they demolished the first one. This one is late 17th century, and according to the architects at the time, a bit like Vauban would have said in France, it's got like a 5-pointed star. The idea is that each bastion can reinforce the others, that there are no blind spots. And here we see local people, local warriors, many of whom would have fought against the European immigrants. I know people often like to say settlers. So here was the governor's house. How about that? Very fine house. I mean, over time it became less and less of a fortification and more of a residence because modern artillery will be able to knock down these walls anyway. And there were hills overlooking it. They had wanted to build on Signal Hill, but they didn't have enough labour to do so because it was very hard work to bring all the stones up there, although apparently the stones here were quarried from Signal Hill. So they had brought people in servitude from the Dutch colonies in the Far East. Remember, they ruled Sri Lanka in those days, as bits of Indonesia, Malaysia. They had ports on the coast of India and so forth. They purchased people who were held in slavery, who'd come from Madagascar and other places, people whom the Portuguese had abducted from Angola and Mozambique and so on. I thought he was telling me to do. They were telling me not to film, but no. Yeah, so that was it. And Simon van der Stella lived here for a while when he was governor towards the end of the 17th century. Stellenbosch, as in Stella's bush, which is like 2 hours drive inland from here. That's named in his honour, and has got one of South Africa's more renowned universities. What can I say? So this was an army base later on, and then the British Army defeated the Dutch East India Company here about 1794, took it, part of some peace treaty. I think it was a piece of Amiens. It was returned to the Netherlands, and then the Napoleonic Wars began again, and the Netherlands was on the side of France again. Remember, Napoleon Bonaparte put his brother Louis on the throne there as King of Holland, and his brother Louis attempted to learn the Dutch language, address the Dutch Parliament, but couldn't do it properly, and wanted to tell the Dutch Parliament, "I am the King of Holland," but he mispronounced it and said, "I am the Rabbit of Holland." Nevertheless, they appreciated his effort, but because of that, that's why the British Army defeated the Dutch again, took this again, and this time Britain was not going to hand it back because dozens of them had been killed, and they were not going to give that away, and so it remained under British rule for quite some time. But yeah, so then it was, apparently soldiers around here even to this day. But it's overlooked, as you can see, by Table Mountain. So obviously sharpshooters from up there could be shooting down here. In the very early days, obviously, muskets could only fire 200 meters maximum, and were only accurate for about half that range, and artillery couldn't even fire that far either. So it was very close to the sea. Remember, the shoreline has shifted as they reclaimed land after the Second World War. So this was very close to the sea, and actually some of the basements even got flooded with seawater. So how about that for a fine house that the governor had? Okay, offices and all there. So it's not a very tall building. They weren't able to build things very high in those days. It's not to the late 19th century that those steel girders came out, allowing people to construct skyscrapers and so forth. And because there were no lifts, people wanted to carry things up very high, bringing babies up and down, disabled people up and down stairs was very tricky. Okay, and so then there are memorials here to various South Africans who fought in the First World War, Second World War, and so on. It was an all-white army in those days. It was a labour corps for black men, because there's a lot of loading and unloading of trains, trucks, ships, and so on, all the tons of ammunition and rations that had to move around, digging graves and trenches and so forth. And so some of those men got killed as well. So I mustn't discount their valour, because they were obviously in great danger. There were shells hitting them, bullets occasionally. They had no guns with which to defend themselves. See these red shutters here? That's because it was the arsenal to indicate danger, so no smoking around here. Remember, well into the 20th century, most men smoked. The shutters and the rest of the castle are green. And so it goes on. We're going to see a traditional style house, just fashioned from reeds. I remember I was fascinated by the Zulus when I was little, and they used to live in houses like this. I think people been paying off a mortgage for decades in Ireland, whereas here in South Africa, they could build a house in under a day. Here it is. So walk around it. So I had a guide, and he was a native speaker of Afrikaans. He's a black person, they're not fully of Dutch descent, and is very spoken to these days in Cape Town, Afrikaans. So we go in, see what it's like. Have to bow down. What do you think? Now, when it rains, the reeds expand and waterproof it apparently. But I think obviously quite a bit would get through before that. Not a great deal of warmth. It was a very warm place. So a very sensible place to live. And look, they got chairs and tables and brooms and so on. I think this wooden floor they wouldn't have had, would have been an earthen floor. Okay. It's this little recorded video, you're hearing that. Step out now. Okay, so that's a little bit of the Castle of Good Hope. Thank you for watching my video, and make sure you subscribe on Patreon and donate PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. Goodbye.